Behoba. Red Welcome to Baobab, Redwood and Neem, the Peace Vigil interview series which seeks to inspire hope and action for peace. Peace Vigil works on peace education. Today we'll be talking to Professor Mohan Bhagat, Professor Emeritus, Department of Physics, University of Maryland in the USA. Dr. Bhagat was born in 1933 in Jammu, India. Dr. Bhagat has been working for 3 decades to support many marginalized communities in India, including women, Dalit, tribal, and minority communities. His focus has been primary and high school education, support for farmers, improvement of health services, and promotion of eco-friendly development. Dr. Bhagat has taught physics at the Delhi University, Oxford University, and the University of Maryland. If you like this interview, please do remember to like and subscribe. With that, please enjoy this interview with Dr. Mohan Bhagat.
Welcome, Dr. Bhagat, to this program. We are very pleased that we are here in your home in Maryland and talking to you. It's been 3 years since we met, and I have so many questions. So, first of all, thank you for taking time out to talk to us.
How can you thank? When a daughter is here, that's a special time for me.
Thank you so much. So, Dr. Bhagat, whatever's happening in India right now, could you share with us your thoughts on what's happening and why you think it should be of concern to even non-Indians or people who are not of Indian origin?
The problem is that people feel threatened, especially in a situation where the economy is not doing well. And one way that the power structure has is to divide people and say, look, if those guys were not here, you would be getting much better stuff out of the country. So let's get rid of them. And that's something which is not just for India, it's true of a large number of places. It is only that historically, India is probably the most complex society on earth. I don't know of any other country where there are so many languages, so many even ways of getting dressed,
Yes.
so many foods,
Yes.
and then look at the Indian note. The Indian 100 rupee note has 15 languages on it. Do you know any other country which has got 15? Not dialects. And that tells you that, in fact, it is a miracle that the founding fathers of India felt and laid down a foundation which said that in spite of all these differences, in spite of the fact that you go 50 miles and the language certainly changes and you cannot speak to people, it is possible to have a country like this.
True.
So if India succeeds, the world will succeed. But unfortunately, if India fails, then the whole world has a problem.
So in India, we see perhaps the most diverse country in the world, as you're saying. So if we can have success there with people living together, it will also be a victory for the world.
Absolutely.
Yes.
India will be like a clarion call for humanity, that if we can do it, you can also do it.
For so many years after India's independence, despite some communal tensions or sectarian tensions, as we may call them, by and large, India was a rainbow nation. Various communities, they thrived and lived together. So, no?
See, to some extent, that's a somewhat artificial look.
Okay.
I mean, for instance, some of my family, who obviously are Punjabis, were living in Calcutta, They had nothing to do with the Bengalis.
Okay.
There was a Punjab club to which the Punjabis went.
Okay.
Not a single Bengali would go there. And these Punjabis, many of whom were my family, they had been living there for 20, 25 years. Most of them could not speak a word of Bengali. They had never felt any reason to learn the language.
Actually, you're right. I also know. I also know of such cases. Yes.
And in fact, finally, my brother-in-law's business ran into trouble because, of course, all his labor was Bengali. And they blew up. And he had to literally close down. He was a publisher. And he had to close down and return to Jammu
I see.
at the ripe old age of 46. So I'm saying that these tensions have been there all along. Then, of course, you and I both know the tensions between Hindus and Sikhs and all kinds of those things. But yes, there was at least a veneer of things more or less okay. But then it's also true that the present government has a philosophical history that Hindus are the ones who belong to India and everybody else should go somewhere else. I had some people here for dinner and we were talking about hijabs because my brother's daughter is married to a Muslim. One of them wears a hijab and the other one doesn't. So I told them, why should she give up the hijab? And you know what they kept saying? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. In some sense, they still don't believe that Muslims actually belong in India, as if they are visitors. For God's sake, there are 200 million Muslims in India. Their grandparents, their great-grandparents, their great-great-great-grandparents have been there for centuries. How can you tell them that you are outsiders? That makes no sense. But unfortunately, the present leadership is convinced that the future of India lies in so-called Hindutva. And as I was perhaps have recited this particular jingle for you many, many times, that in 1941-42, the house where we lived right across from a temple, in the temple yard, the RSS used to meet. So we used to go there. And quite often we used to sing, जो जीवन स्वतंत्र नहीं तो जी करके क्या होगा ऐसे स्वराज से यदि हिंदुत्व न होगा. That this is now 80 years earlier, they were convinced that Swaraj makes sense only with Hindutva.
So, that is the time when the Quit India movement is going on, led by Gandhi. So, the British are being told you must quit India. And at that time, RSS is telling people that independence will be of no use unless it is a Hindu Rashtra, it is based on Hindutva and so on. So, it is actually counteractive, right? It is countering Gandhi's Quit India movement because it is basically saying, oh, don't ask for independence unless it is a Hindu Rashtra.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that shall we say, the conservative Hindus really never fought against the British. I mean, Savarkar, he got arrested, but then he repeatedly apologized and told the British, I will never work against you again. And so the Hindu Mahasabha really was not a part of the independence movement.
Yeah, but I guess my point is that it's one thing to not support something, it's another thing to cause damage to it. So the RSS in 1942, when it is saying independence is of no use unless it is for a Hindu Rashtra, it is actually damaging the national movement.
That is true, but the fact of the matter is also that they were quite happy for Pakistan to be formed because they had decided that this was the one way where they could drive all the Muslims out of India. and put the, as we were saying, even today, when something wrong happens, they will yell at people, go to Pakistan, why are you here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what they want to do, push them out.
Why is it? Why do they hate Muslims so much?
Well, if you interact with these people, which I have to admit now that I avoid as much as I possibly can, but there was a time organization here, they invited me to join with them, except for the second or third time around when they were talking, they put forth the assertion that India really, that there was no such thing as Aryans, that actually Hindus were always the original people of India. So India belongs to Hindus. Everyone else has been an outsider, and it's high time that we send them back. Then they say, well, their origins are outside, why are they here? So again, it's this feeling that that they would prosper if they can throw these people out and they don't have to make connections and so on. Then there are religious laws and whatnot. Again, variety requires adjustment. Variety requires deeper thinking and realization that she has as much right to live as I do, that she has as much right to her opinions as I have. She has as much right to talk of God as I have. As Gandhi used to say, Ishwar Allah Tere Naam, Sabko Sammati De Bhagwan. That the purpose of God is, you can appeal to that idea anytime, but the main purpose of God is to give you some sense of belonging as a human being, to give you some sense that not only you belong, but he belongs and she belongs and they belong. Everybody belongs. Because God is not something tiny or it pervades everything.
Yeah. So this is very interesting because what you are saying is that the philosophy of Hindutva, just like the philosophy of fascism or Nazism, is about homogeneity, and they cannot deal with diversity, and that diversity is a threat to that worldview.
You see, again, even within that, the so-called, I hate that word, but I have to use it, the so-called upper castes will tell you that they are the real ones.
Yes.
And everybody else is second rate and so the Manu and so on and so forth. You are not allowed to read this, you are not allowed to read that, pour something into their ears. All that is a bunch of nonsense. But the fact of the matter is that is there. Even today, we have found out where a Dalit goes to some place, especially women, goes to collect water, and they get beaten up. Because they are not supposed to draw water from the well.
So it's happening even today.
They have to wait for a Brahmin to come and take the water out and pour it into their... How dare they do that? Even today, there are places where, you know, even in the way out in a village, there will be a tea shop, but there are special cups at the back, which will be given to the Dalits. And that's, again, as again Gandhi used to say, I have never understood why people want to stand up so that they can look down upon somebody else. Why are people afraid of equality?
True.
But as you know, this is not just India, this is true of every country that you can live. We live in the United States, and I wish I could say that this, on paper, this is supposed to be more civilized. But you and I both know that 150 things are covered up in order to make it look that it is civilized.
True. So, Dr. Bhagat, my next question will be about how these ideas of hate are spread. One of the ways they're spread is through the media, and in that, cinema also plays a big role. You were earlier talking to me about the Kashmir Files, and you wanted to share with me your thoughts on that particular movie and the history of the Pandits being driven out of the Kashmir Valley. So I'd like you to please talk to us about that.
It's true that Kashmiri Pandits were pushed out of the valley in 1989 or so. But I have always felt that there is something which is being forgotten. 1947-48, Punjab was blowing up. There were riots everywhere. But nobody ever asks, why were there no riots in Srinagar? After Baramulla fell, when the power station was gone, there was no power in Srinagar. Our brilliant Maharaja packed all his fancy stuff in fleet of cars and abandoned Srinagar and drove to Jammu. Right about that time, he also let Sheikh Abdullah and Bakshi out of jail. Now, while Punjab was burning, Bakshi and Sheikh Abdullah arranged young Muslim boys to go and parade in Srinagar. Not a single riot. No police, no military.
Yeah, and the king has abandoned the state.
But our power structure was to some extent abandoned.
Yeah. And still there were no killings
and
there.
no killing, nothing.
No
but
killings.
42 years later, there were 40,000 Indian soldiers in Kashmir. But that gentleman, Jagmohan,
Jagmohan.
he was an RSS man. And he wanted to show that he was going to preserve the Hindus. So he pushed the Pandits out. Now, 42 years earlier, young Muslim boys could keep peace. But fully armed Indian military could not. The fact of the matter is that if the government with tens of military fails to act and protect the population, then it tells me that the government in fact is pushing this to happen.
No, that's
You are asking people to leave, to get out, rather than saying, no, I have soldiers standing at the end of every mohalla to make sure that everything is okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was a separatist movement in Kashmir, and there's no point in denying that.
Yes.
But then, not too long after that, there is a family member who was some sort of high-up police person. And I don't know the person, but the story within the family was that many times he had told the family, I hope they never try to clean up the river and the lakes, because there are a huge number of bodies lying underneath. Nobody knows the precise numbers, but even the government admits that something of the order of 3,000 or 4,000 young men disappeared. The people claim that it is more like 30,000.
And most of these people
for a while I was supporting a semi-orphan age in Srinagar. They are called semi-orphans because the fathers have disappeared, the mothers are still there. And these are also called half-widows because they don't know
whether
what happened to their husbands.
Yeah. And Dr. Bhagat, these bodies that are being talked about, they'd be mostly Muslims, the people whose bodies can't
They're
be found.
young Muslims and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that because of that Armed Forces Special Powers Act, the armed forces do all kinds of unpleasant things. And
Yeah.
I mean, my own family, as I said earlier, my brother's daughter is married to a Muslim. There, if the military knocks on her door, she cannot
Yeah.
keep it closed. She
Yeah.
has to open it. Otherwise, they'll shoot their way in.
Yeah. Dr. Bhagat, just for our audience, I want to remind our viewers that we have a good detailed interview with Dr. Bhagat on his childhood in Jammu that they should watch, where he talks more about his childhood. And he also met Gandhi at that time, and he also talks about the RSS shakhas there. So, Dr. Bhagat, many analysts believe that it is actually the middle caste and the middle class that is giving strength to Hindutva today. Because they, if they actually sided with the Dalits or with the marginalized, that would be a pretty big number. But they are not doing that.
No, you are absolutely right. In fact, the so-called educated people of India are, in my opinion, standing in the way of things getting better. Again, because the talk is that, they will get the jobs, they will
Exactly.
they will do this, they
Yeah.
will do that and the other. It's again
A fear game.
economic.
Yeah.
So make sure that they don't go, so
Yes.
I have everything available
Yeah,
and
yeah.
whatnot.
I think I was trying to look into the factors that make people support a fascist regime like we have in India right now, and what you're saying about the fear factor is pretty big. But I want to ask you, because you grew up in an environment where you were the privileged caste, is that how does one break that cycle? How does one realize that, look, even if I am gaining from it, it's still wrong? Because many of the analysts say that the middle caste or the middle class always likes to associate with the people who are above them. So they don't want to associate with people who are below them. They want to associate with people who are above them. So whether it's caste or class.
Well, there again, the fact is, people, it sort of feels their ego that that somebody is below them. I mean, it's remarkable that the Indians living in the United States, again and again I have heard people say, but we are not blacks. The whites certainly don't call us white, but
What are some of the things we can do to make sure that...
So I was referring earlier to this new, this social and emotional teaching.
Social and emotional teaching.
हमारे ज़माने में, of course, my teaching was always at the university level, where people are already formed all kinds of things which are already there. And I actually have no idea what kind of caste distribution was in the classes. Don't forget the fact that I left India 65 years ago. India had barely become independent. I left in 57, but Punjab was still not fully recovered from whatever had happened in 47, 48. So I have absolutely no idea what kind of caste distribution there was. There was certainly, one thing was certainly true, that there were very few women in physics.
Okay.
I think by the time 57 came along, there were probably three girls out of 68 or something like that.
Where you were teaching?
Where we were teaching Delhi University.
Gee, okay.
So caste, in some sense or the other, never.
Well, you probably also had no reason to look into it, in those days.
Not at all,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the classes were small. Actually, when I started Delhi University in 51, the master's class had only 18 students.
I see.
And there would be no way to know what their castes were or anything.
What about religion? Were there many Muslims or Christians?
Sorry?
Were there many Muslims or Christians?
Oh, no Muslims. There was one Christian, but he was from, his name was Bhupendra. Everybody called him Bhupenstein. He was from Mauritius.
Acha.
But he was the only Christian that I am aware of.
Okay, there were no Muslims there.
And no Muslims, not at all.
And Dr. Bhagat, then when you went to Oxford, what about there? Were there many Indians in your class?
There were few Indians. In fact, for a while, I even tried to start an Indian group there and whatnot. But it was not very successful. There again, there were all kinds of negatives and whatnot. But
And here, of course, in UMD, where you taught for many decades, there were many Indians. At least in the time I have known you, there were a lot of Indian students.
well, again, when I first came to this country, or even when I came here in '62, there were a total of probably no more than a couple of thousand Indians in the Washington area. I remember the first Diwali we had was on the campus. It held no more than 150 people, and everybody was there, more or less. So then again, who knows anything about anybody's caste and whatnot.
And what about Muslims here?
There are very few Muslims. Indians, Muslims, very few Muslims.
So it surprises me that in 3 countries you taught, there were hardly any Muslims in the Indian diaspora even who were studying in these good institutions of education, physics, and yet Muslims are such a big threat according to the RSS, that they're taking everything. Even in the teaching profession, I see the professors, there's hardly any Muslim.
Well, as I said, that is all a made-up nonsense. That is, keep on saying that, oh, if they didn't take this, you would get it.
Yeah.
But it's clear that Muslims are, unfortunately, not properly represented in any upper echelons of society.
True.
They don't get so much education, their average income is lower, and so on and so forth. But you have to, of course, admit, because I don't live there anymore, all my statements are mostly academic from what I read and whatnot.
No, but that is not entirely true, Dr. Bhagat, because as we know, you've been working very hard to support people who are doing work in India, and you get regular reports from them.
As far as I can tell, we are doing our level best to make sure that children of all kinds are there. In fact, there are several schools which are concentrating on Dalit children, in Dalit children and tribal children and so on and so forth. There are several schools, in fact, where I would say majority are first of all women, and secondly they are Dalits or tribal children.
So Dr. Bhagat, last question for you. The world right now is seeing a lot of violence and pain, not just in India but in many parts of the world. I know that you're going to be turning 90 next year. You have lived a full and active life and have been an inspiration for people like me. When I look at you, despite the discussions we often have about how bad things are, I do see that glimmer of hope in you, because otherwise you wouldn't be still supporting activities in India and elsewhere for justice and peace. So what is it that keeps you going? What is it that can help all of us keep going in this sad environment?
One word: children.
I see.
The most beautiful thing when I go for a walk is to see small children. The future belongs to them. And the smaller the child, the more beautiful it is. And I am fully convinced that children belong to everybody. They are exquisite. Grown-ups will help grown-ups, but children are everybody's responsibility.
Yes. Yes.
Now, because of COVID and so on, one keeps one's distance.
Yeah.
But before COVID, quite often it would happen. The children would be going and I would stop and kind of try to talk to them for a minute or two. And the mothers are very happy.
So, Dr.
Children
Bhagat,
are our hope.
Children are our hope. Yeah.
There is no question in my mind. That's why I said earlier also, we want to put together education in such a way that right from the one of the questions that one of these senators asked Ketanji was essentially, do you think children have a race in them? And my claim is that yes, they will, depending upon what you expose them to.
Exactly.
Otherwise, basically, children don't, eventually they learn to be,
We teach them.
we teach them.
Yeah, just like Mandela said that, hate is taught. And so can love be taught. And in fact, love comes more easily to a human heart than hate.
Love should come more easily, but unfortunately we intervene.
Yeah.
You can't do this, you can't do that. You must
Don't
not
make
play
friends with
them.
this one.
You can't play with them, you can't do this.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
Yeah. You're right. Dr. Bhagat, I'd also like you to please sing 2 songs for us. One you can choose, but one that I really want you to sing is Ishwar Allah Tero Naam, because you mentioned that in the interview and you have a beautiful voice. So please, if you could sing Gandhi's
No, we
Ramdhun.
can sing it together.
Okay, we'll sing it together.
ईश्वर अल्लाह तेरे नाम सबको सम्मति दे भगवान.
Wow. And Dr. Bhagat, one more song.
किसको कहूँ मैं अल्लाह बाबा, किसको कहूँ मैं राम. एक ही माया, एक ही छाया, एक ही सारा काम. किसको कहूँ मैं राम. एक बाप के साथ लाखों बच्चे इस धरती पर धाम. इनमें कौन मुसलमान बाबा, किसका हिंदू नाम.
Wow.
किसको कहूँ मैं राम.
Dr. Bhagat, was this written by you? This song?
Sorry?
Was this song written by you?
This goes back to when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I don't remember.
You
that.
don't remember. Dr.
कुल
Bhagat,
आसमां से अच्छा
जी, कुल,
है ये जहां हमारा.
जी, जी.
ये आशियां हमारा, ये बाग जहां हमारा. धरती पे इसकी लहरें, झीलें समुद्र दरिया. इन पानियों के दम से यकता है घर हमारा.
वाह.
कुछ गलतियां हुई हैं, ये गर्म हो रहा है. हिफाजत इसकी करना ही धर्म है हमारा.
क्या बात है.
बोलो सलाम अहिंसा, लिखो प्यार और शांति. सब हथियारों से बढ़कर ये धनुष है हमारा.
वाह.
जो बैर और बढ़ाए वो शायद बुरी बला है.
सही बात है.
इंसान है हम, जगत हैं, एक कुनबा है हमारा.
वाह. ये डॉक्टर भगत आपने खुद लिखा था.
हाँ जी.
ये वाला तो आपने खुद लिखा था. ये बहुत ही खूबसूरत है.
You were listening to Baobab, Redwood and Neem by Peace Vigil. Our guest today was Dr. Mohan Bhagat. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.